Now I've come to the end of my first row, and as you can see I have stitches along and they're relatively even. Sometimes you can pull them just a little bit and get them more even, but placement as you put them originally is very important, as is tension on your thread as you're tightening them down. Now at the very end of the row I have to decide whether or not one more stitch will fit, or whether or not I should just end the row like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just end the row. I don't think I can fit another stitch here. It'll look crowded. So to end the row, I take the thread underneath the coordinate after the final stitch to the outside. It needs to be placed approximately where it's even with the edge of the stitches and not pulled one way or the other. So it needs to be in line with this stitch. And then you come around at least one more time, just whipping it to the coordinate thread, so that you've left a space here by placing an extra thread before you go back to do the rest of your work. Now you can continue back making the stitch this way to have a second row of single Brussels. And as you do, that tends to roll on you and become very difficult to do. So many stitches are started with a single Brussels and then move to another stitch. You can continue to do single Brussels. You do have to watch that your stitches have not rolled up underneath the previous row. It is a little bit harder to do than it sounds. The next stitch we're going to do is called corded Brussels, and that stitch is easier to do than single Brussels because it doesn't tend to roll on you. And to do corded Brussels, we would move immediately into what's called laying the cord from this stitch. So I would take this cord and I would pull it up to the other side and estimate where I want it to be. I want it to be pretty evenly spaced. Where do I want it to lay? And I see that I want it to end right here. So I'm going to go underneath with my needle where I want that cord to lay and pull through. Easier said than done sometimes. As you can see, I've laid a cord in underneath my stitches. And then I'm going to go beside it and anchor it down, just with a whip stitch around the coordinate. Now I'm ready to work the next row. But I need to decide now if I have enough thread to work the next row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my thread along the length of my work, back again, and then back one more time. And if I have more than 3, I should be able to complete that row, and I won't have very much to spare. If I were to not have enough, I would anchor the thread and add on. And the way you would do that is to continue to whip stitch down this row and then take your needle off your thread, and right here you would add, using the knot we originally started with, a new thread and continue to work. I don't need to do that this time, but that is where I would do it. It would always be at the edge that you try to add the additional thread. So now we're going to work another row of the Brussels stitch. I'm going to come through the hole, the loop from the previous row, under the thread that I've laid in, and then over my working thread and pull that through, keeping it perpendicular as I tension. Then I'm going to do the next one through the loop of the previous row, under the cord, and over my working thread. This stitch is called corded Brussels stitch. You would continue until you reach the other side. One more time, through the loop in the previous row, under the cord, over my working thread, and tension.